The movie begins by showing a scene of a national swimming championship for young male athletes. Two participants continue to compete to be the first place winner, a 7-year-old boy named Wonil and an 8-year-old named Wusong. Wonil's parents and Wusong seemed excited to support their children in the audience. After several rounds, Wonil finally won first place, while Wusong had to settle for second place with a minimal time difference. The scene switches to Wonil, who has grown up and becomes a high school student at one of the city's public schools. That day, he was called to the teacher's room because Wonil and his friends had been caught drinking around the school. Although Wonil committed the act of mischief with several other students, he was the only student expelled. This is because other students' parents have wealth and positions in the government, while Wonil was just an orphan from an ordinary family. In addition to being unfairly expelled from school, the guidance and counseling teacher who handled Wonil's case did not try hard to help him. Instead, the teacher insulted Wonil, who came from a poor family. Wonil was actually a good student and loved to help others. But since he lost his parents, Wonil became unruly and often involved in problems. After being expelled from school, Wonil had lunch at a meat restaurant with a man who became his guardian after his parents died. The old man, Jae-suk, volunteered as Wonil's guardian considering that Wonil was the son of his best friend who had died. Jae-suk cared for and loved him so much. He often invited Wonil to have meat because he had a big appetite. He felt concerned after learning that Wonil was expelled from school while the other students from wealthy families could still continue their school comfortably. Jae-suk wanted Wonil's future to be better. He then asked Wonil to enter the National Swimming Academy like his father did. Wonil immediately refused the request for some reasons that were still unknown. He hated the swimming pool and didn't want to be a swimmer like his father. However, Jae-suk still forced him to join the National Swimming School because he realized that Wonil had tremendous potential in swimming. After lunch with Jae-suk, Wonil moved out of the school dorm. He was asked to stay at Jae-suk's house until the athlete's school registration opened. At that house, Wonil met his childhood friend, Jung-eun, Jae-suk's only daughter, who used to attend Wonil's matches when he was a kid. Since they had been separated for years, Jae-suk invited Wonil and his daughter to have meet together on the rooftop terrace while talking. During the conversation, Jung-eun persuaded Wonil not to waste his time playing around and trying to refocus on training national swimming athletes like before. On the other hand, Wusong, a swimming athlete who used to be Wonil's rival in the Children's National Swimming Championship, had become an international swimming athlete. Unlike Wonil, who decided to quit swimming since his parents died, Wusong continued his swimming career and got full support from his parents. Recently, Wusong often won national swimming competitions and was appointed as one of South Korea's representatives in the International Swimming Championships. In addition to having glorious achievements, Wusong also had a handsome and charismatic face, so it is not surprising that the media highlighted his daily life. Unfortunately, in the last International Swimming Championship, Wusong got into a fight with one of the Australian athletes, and the scandal was widely reported by the media. As a result, the South Korean Swimming Federation organization decided to stop Wusong from participating in the international swimming event for a while. However, Wusong remained on the South Korean national swimming team because the federation team felt reluctant toward his father, a public official. In the evening, Wusong's father forcibly enrolled Wusong in a national swimming school so that they could improve his reputation in public. Wusong refused to go to the athlete's school, but his father insisted that he could not do much other than follow his father's order. Not only did Wusong, who had to enter the national swimming school, but Wonil also experienced the same situation. That day, Jae-suk had to work hard to get Wonil out of his car because he refused to enter the athlete's school. However, Wonil finally gave up and wholeheartedly entered the athlete's school, considering that Jae-suk had paid dearly for him to enter the school. Upon Wonil's arrival at his dorm room, he met Wusong, who was drying his hair. It turned out that Wonil and Wusong will be roommates during their training at the swimming school. The next day at the pool arena, the swimming coach, Jang Ko-chi, introduced Wonil and Wusong to other swimmers. The students seemed to recognize Wusong, a national athlete who had won the national championship several times. Still, they did not know Wonil very well, who only participated in the national swimming championship at a young age. After a short introduction and sufficient warm-up, all students began to undergo their training. Strangely, Wonil did not even jump into the pool like the other students and preferred to stand by the pool while encouraging the other students. Coach Jang felt annoyed by Wonil's silly behavior and kept telling him to train with the other students immediately. At lunchtime in the cafeteria, Wonil, as usual, greedily devoured all the food in large portions. While he was enjoying his lunch, two senior students, Jung-dong and Dae-chan, approached Wonil's table and asked him to come to their room tonight. In the evening, Wonil went to Jung-dong and Dae-chan's room, and they immediately showed off their muscle strength in front of Wonil and asked him to join their group. Seeing their muscles, Wonil was not affected. Instead, he started to get bored with their strange behavior. However, after they teased him with various delicacies, Wonil instantly accepted their invitation and began to devour all the food with great greed. Jung-dong and Daichan invited him to drink to celebrate his joining their group. Won-il, tempted by various delicacies, agreed to the invitation even though their school had banned students from drinking during exercise. While at the school swimming pool, Woo-sung seriously learned swimming techniques from a video of another swimmer. But even though he had repeatedly tried to practice it, Woo-sung failed to master it. The following morning, Coach Jong gathered all the students to give an announcement. He claimed to have received a report from someone that a swimming athlete had been drinking in the school dormitory. Coach Jong asked the drunk student to come forward, or he would punish all the students. Hearing that, Won-il, who didn't want other students to get into trouble, chose to come forward and confess that he had been drunk last night. Coach Jong asked why Won-il drank on his first training day. Won-il replied that he was annoyed by having to go into the water again. After receiving his confession, Coach Jong immediately ordered Won-il and the other students to do 50 laps of swimming. But Won-il, who felt it was unfair to the other students, protested against it and said he would do all the punishment himself. Hearing that, Coach Jong said that he would not punish the other students, but Won-il had to do 500 laps of swimming practice by himself. Jung-dong, Daichan, and the other students were surprised when Won-il carried out the punishment and started doing 500 laps of swimming by himself. The other students then started to leave Won-il. Jung-dong and Daichan, who felt guilty, decided to accompany Won-il until he completed the sentence. After a few hours, Coach Jong and a few other students returned to the pool to check on Won-il's completed rounds. Unexpectedly, Won-il completed 500 laps of the pool alone, even though he had an extreme limp due to fatigue. But Won-il still had little energy to ask for food in the cafeteria, so Jung-dong and Daichan helped him by giving him some food. The following day, Won-il was still limp in his room. Woo-sung then helped him to get a drink because Won-il's hands were still feeble. At that moment, Won-il again reminded Woo-sung that they had known each other since they were kids. A few years ago, after they completed the National Swimming Championship, Woo-sung deliberately put his silver medal on the floor. Won-il, who saw it, picked up the medal and handed it to Woo-sung. However, Woo-sung refused because he wanted the gold medal more. Hearing that, Won-il, who at that time managed to get a gold medal, kindly handed his gold medal to Woo-sung. In the following day, all swimming students returned to their training intensively, but Won-il and his friends were still playing around so often that it frustrated Coach Jong. One day when the school holidays arrived, Woo-sung purposely bought a flower bucket and walked to Jung-eun's house. Jung-eun was a beautiful girl he had loved since childhood. Upon arriving there, he was shocked by Won-il's appearance. He only found out that Won-il lived in the same house as Jung-eun and spontaneously hid the flowers he carried behind his back. That day, the three had met together on the roof terrace of Jung-eun's house with Daichan and Jung-dong. Woo-sung, jealous of the closeness between Won-il and Jung-eun, decided to express his feelings to Jung-eun in front of everyone. Jung-eun and the others seemed surprised to hear Woo-sung's words. Since that day, Won-il often asked Woo-sung if he loved Jung-eun. It was still unknown why Won-il did that, but it seemed that Won-il secretly liked Jung-eun too, but he was afraid of expressing his feeling. The other day when Jung-eun was drying the blankets, Woo-sung suddenly appeared and teased Jung-eun. They then had lunch together at the Chicken Claw restaurant. Surprisingly, Jung-eun ate greedily in front of Woo-sung and showed him her ridiculous side. Even though Jung-eun deliberately did it make Woo-sung didn't like her, Woo-sung is even more attracted by her charm. On the other hand, Jae-suk, watching cartoons with Won-il, again reminded Won-il that it was the day of his father's death, so he asked Won-il to visit his father's grave. But Won-il, who still hated his late father, was very irritated and chose to go to the house's roof. He accidentally saw Woo-sung and Jung-eun joking in front of Jung-eun's house, and he was even more irritated by their closeness. A few weeks later, all students of national swimming athletes were sent to the Philippines to do sparring with athletes from other countries. Upon arrival, Won-il and his gang preferred to relax and play with hot girls from the Philippines while Woo-sung was still diligently exercising with his personal trainer. The next day when Woo-sung was at the hotel, he again met an Australian athlete who had been in conflict with him. The athlete continued to insult Woo-sung in front of other athletes. Won-il, who saw it, helped Woo-sung and challenged the Australian team to compete. At first, the Australian squad looked superior to the South Korean team, but the South Korean team won the game thanks to Won-il's extraordinary ability. After they returned to South Korea, Won-il was pleased and intended to give the souvenirs he bought from abroad to Jung-eun. At the same time, Jung-eun and her band were singing by the pool that Won-il used to use for swimming and exercising. Unfortunately, at that time, Woo-sung had arrived first at the place. He then gave a luxurious gift to Jung-eun. Won-il, who had just arrived at the location, reluctantly canceled his intention to hand the souvenir to her. The following day, Coach Jong gathered all senior and junior students into the classroom to announce the candidates to be sent to the national swimming competition. Woo-sung, Daichan, and Jung-dong made it to the list of athletes who would participate in the competition, but unfortunately, Won-il still had yet to. After the announcement, a senior student, Woo Hyun, suddenly approached Jung Dong in the locker room. Woo Hyun apparently felt annoyed because Jung Dong became a candidate for the competition, so Woo Hyun intended to force him to withdraw. But Jung Dong refused, and immediately Woo Hyun beat Jung Dong and broke his waist. As a result, Jung Dong was forced to withdraw from the competition and quit the national athlete school due to his severe injuries. Jung Dong's best friends, Dae-chan and Won-il, felt very angry when they let Woo Hyun go but couldn't do much to help Jung Dong. The next day, Dae-chan and Won-il had lunch in the cafeteria. Woo Hyun innocently came to mock Jung Dong in front of Dae-chan and Won-il. Knowing that Woo Hyun was the cause of Jung Dong's withdrawal, Won-il was furious and couldn't hold his anger in anymore. He then beat Woo Hyun so hard that he fell unconscious and collapsed. As a result, Woo Hyun was seriously injured, and Won-il had to be expelled from the national athlete school. Won-il realized that his father, a swimming athlete, was also killed due to cunning from other swimmers. So, the incident caused Won-il to remember his late father. In front of his father's grave, Won-il looked at his father's picture and recalled the painful moment when he lost his father. On the other hand, Woo-sung, who knew about Won-il's darkest days and the tragic events that happened to his father, began to feel sympathy for Won-il. Woo-sung went to see a well-known reporter to ask for a videotape about Won-il's father. Meanwhile, Won-il had lost his spirit and preferred isolating himself in the room and refusing to eat. 2 days later, he felt disturbed after hearing the sound of an electric drill behind the door. He decided to open his door lock. It turned out that the voice came from Woo-sung, who asked the repairman for help to break through Won-il's door forcefully. Woo-sung then gave Won-il a tablet with a video and asked him to watch the video. After Woo-sung left, Won-il played the video, and it turned out that it was the video of his father's interview a few years ago. In the video, his father said that he loved him very much and felt proud because Won-il was a swimmer who always managed to get first place. This was because his father was a swimmer who always got second or third place and never succeeded in reaching first place. After hearing that, Won-il immediately went to his father's grave and took his father's swimming cap. But unexpectedly, Won-il found writing behind it, which made him cry. Upon Won-il's return from his father's grave, Woo-sung suddenly approached Won-il and handed him a swimming competition form without saying anything. Ultimately, his effort to restore Won-il's spirit was successful, and Won-il began to be motivated to enter the national swimming competition. Since that day, Jae-suk began to train Won-il intensively with Jung-un, who always supported and accompanied him. With his great enthusiasm and will, Won-il could undergo the training with dedication and not give up easily. At the same time, Woo-sung and several students of other national athletes also continued to train non-stop, considering that the swimming competition would be held in a few months. That day after exercising, Jung-un invited Won-il to go somewhere, and that's when he saw the bracelet she wore. The bracelet was actually the gift he gave the other day, but he still hesitated to give it at that time because he also wanted to write a love letter in the gift box. After realizing that Jung-un had read the letter, Won-il misbehaved and immediately ran away from her. In the evening, Woo-sung and his father were having dinner with an important official in a national swimming competition at a fancy restaurant. It turned out that night, Woo-sung's father had agreed with the competition committee to include Woo-sung in the national team without participating in the selection. Woo-sung immediately hit the table and said he could get into the national team without using such a dirty way. Upon arrival at home, Woo-sung's father slapped Woo-sung due to his behavior at the night meeting. He felt that Woo-sung continued to deny him, so he expelled Woo-sung from his house. Woo-sung then went to Won-il's house. He waited in front of Won-il's house, soaking wet. Soon after, Won-il returned home and felt sorry for Woo-sung. He then invited Woo-sung to stay in his house. A few days later, the day of the national swimming competition finally arrived, and all the national swimming athletes were ready in their respective lines. Won-il was preparing to enter the competition using the swimming cap left by his father. Woo-sung has also been present at the competition. After all the competition participants had prepared and taken their positions, the referee blew the whistle, and the match began. It was very intense, and the audience seemed enthusiastic. Woo-sung and Won-il were again competing for first place, and the distance between them was very close. In the last round, Won-il used the no-breathing technique he inherited from his father. He managed to be in a position superior to Woo-sung. No breathing is a technique where the swimmer can hold his breath in the water for as long as possible without stopping running from taking his breath like other swimmers. But unexpectedly, when Woo-sung's position was barely left behind, he could use the same technique. So, he could catch up with Won-il. It turned out that it was a technique that Woo-sung had been studying and training every day, so he had mastered it very well. Woo-sung and Won-il then competed fiercely to reach the finish line, and the audience seemed eager to support them. In the end, Won-il and Woo-sung could get to the finish line at the same time. Since Won-il managed to outperform Woo-sung by 0.01 seconds, Won-il succeeded in securing first place. From the row of seats, Jung-un and Woo-sung's father were thrilled and proud to see them. The film ended with the scene where Woo-sung and Won-il were appointed by the South Korean Swimming Federation Committee to represent their country in an international swimming competition. The moral that can be learned from this movie is, never waste our time on something meaningless. Keep the fighting spirit to achieve our dreams. Always believe that hard work and strong determination will never betray the results. You will succeed in the future.